So something as simple as wrist control can really dictate the direction that the match takes. If I just allow my opponent to control my wrist, this can become an issue. He can open me up, start attacking, and just in general, he's dictating where my wrist belongs or where my wrist goes, just adding another kind of layer to the things I have to defend. As soon as my opponent grabs wrist, I have to make the decision to either allow him to keep grabbing the wrist to use it to reattack, or in this case, we're going to start removing the wrist immediately. Understanding that I have to use what he gives me in order to set up different attacks is very, very valuable. Whenever an opponent grabs the wrist, they're either going to grab wrist downward or wrist up. Nevertheless, essentially, as soon as he grabs my wrist, I'm going to grab his wrist. He gets wrist control, I get wrist control. I'm going to pull and push. I pull with my right, push downward with my left in order to remove this wrist. A little bit more detail is as I grab my opponent's wrist, I like to go thumb down with my left hand, just in case he has super strong grip, so it might be hard. It's a little bit more difficult. It's a little bit more easier to remove the wrist if I go thumb down. I can start re-attacking and circling away. So if my opponent grabs wrist control, a lot of times I'll just pop it off, circle away, and I can start re-engaging how I like. Understanding that whether you're comfortable or not is going to whether you're comfortable or not with the wrist control is going to dictate how you're going to react in this position. Opponent grabs wrist, I push and pull in order to remove the wrist. Whenever I'm pushing and pulling and I gain wrist control, a lot of times I like to take a nice short step towards my opponent's lead leg just to kind of see how he reacts or just see how close I can get to my opponent's leg. Know that whenever we have the motion of our opponent's arm crossing his center line, that means he's vulnerable on one side. Every time he goes from a square stance or a regular stance to me pushing an arm across, I understand that this side is open for various attacks and techniques. My opponent grabs a grip on the wrist, I push and pull to free my wrist. Soon after, I take a nice step towards that leg that I want. I can start pushing backwards, circling around, or at the very least, I just eliminate the wrist, and he gets back in the stance and faces me. Boom, no problem. At least I got rid of the wrist control. Another kind of common thing I like to do afterwards is once opponent grabs wrist control, I remove immediately. As soon as I remove, I start grabbing a grip, thumb up on the elbow, and begin pushing this elbow on by his center line. Again, when I'm in this position, I have the motion of his arm crossing his center line, so that means he has one side of his body that's open and vulnerable for various attacks. So my opponent's in front of me, I have the option of A, removing the wrist and re-attacking that leg. I can remove the wrist and use this elbow pass to where I go from removing wrist, I'm thumb down, I circle up to the elbow. A lot of times, to be a little bit more specific, when I'm controlling the elbow, I like to use my two middle fingers and thumb to kind of grip this joint. As I grip the elbow joint, I pass his arm on through to the center line, exposing one of his sides. Even if he opts to step back and face me, I can start attacking the opposing side, or at least I'm off balancing him, winning the hand fight. So if you do things like pound the head, he grabs the wrist, start removing and creating angles for attacks. Again, I like to have the concept of not circling when our opponent grabs and we're hand fighting, not just circling around. I'm circling and stepping in towards him. So where I remove and I'm creating this angle. I'm creating this angle so I can get close and have better access to my opponent. So opponent likes to grab a wrist, I have the option of removing, circling. I have the option of removing, re-gripping on the elbow, and pushing on by, and now creating a better angle for re-attacks. A little bit more specific, once I create this angle of pushing the elbow, I like to actually place my forehead on my opponent's rib belt. This makes it harder for him to circle and face me. If I don't have my forehead on this rib belt, and I'm just here, he can kind of yank his arm back a lot easier in that case. So he grabs wrist, I remove wrist, and grab a grip on the elbow. As I push elbow across, I take my forehead to the rib delt. and it makes it easier for me to circle and create this angle, and it makes it harder for my opponent to back away and face me. Again, whenever we can implement more layers to our offense or defense, or just more layers to our hand fighting, it's always a good idea. Not only do we want to physically exhaust our opponent, but we want to neurologically overwhelm our opponent as well. So opponent grabs the wrist, I begin removing wrist. Boom, great option, back away, keep space. He grabs wrist again, I can start removing and pushing this elbow on by and circling, stepping towards the leg that I want. In addition to this, when I remove elbow, or when I remove wrist and grip elbow, I can start pushing this by and bringing my forehead to my opponent's rib delt. Now I can start chasing this lead leg. He's going to look to face me. I can begin re-attacking the opposing side or back to the snaps. Even more common, when I'm here, I begin moving this. I like to, as he starts facing me, I start pulling back downward on the head. So I have a combination of, when I was pumping the head earlier, I'm causing reactions from his offense, getting that elbow across. He guards to face me. I can use things like snapping in order to create this angle. So many different things we can do, all coming from the action of my opponent grabbing my wrist. Opponent grabs wrist, I begin removing, pushing this elbow on by. As I push this by, I look to bring my forehead to the rib delt to make it more difficult for him to face me and to make the angle that I'm trying to chase a little bit closer in my favor. So again, just to reiterate, opponent grabs grip on the wrist, have the option of going thumb down, removing, and pushing away. I also have the option of removing the wrist, pushing at the elbow, and trying to chase this lead leg down, circling in towards him. More specific, when I'm removing the wrist, I oftentimes like to place my forehead on the rear delt of my opponent. Notice how I'm not on the front of the shoulder. I create this angle so I'm just slightly behind. Turn this way. Grab his wrist. I remove the wrist, grip on the elbow. As I push by, I grab this angle and I just block it with my forehead. I begin stepping, not in a circular motion, but I step towards the leg that I want, making him reactively circle away and try to face me. So again, very important to understand, there's multiple things we can do if our opponent grabs our wrist. Understand that we can use it to immediately re-attack, or we can use it to gain dominant hand position, or dominant position in general, where I can create this dominant angle. Whenever I'm on the side, I understand that this is the angle that I want and need to start attacking the legs, the waist, jumping onto the back, etc. So don't be shy whenever our opponent grabs the wrist. Good idea to make your mind up. Either remove it, back away, remove it to an elbow pass, or remove it and bring the elbow pass in addition to your head and start blocking and make him step away and face us. Putting these three together is very good, and also adding in some snaps. Whenever he's reacting to one, feel free to toss in a collar tie, off balance him, and this will make this hand fighting section a lot easier to comprehend and flow together. So again, we're in here, opponent grabs wrist, I can remove, push elbow, I can remove, as he looks to face me, maybe I start snapping and creating different angles. Again, whenever we're off balancing our opponent, it's a good idea to start implementing things like snaps, or just whenever he's grabbing wrists, make the decision of removing and re-engaging. Again, big emphasis on not just circling, but stepping towards the leg that I want. If he doesn't react, I'm just going to pick it up. 9 times out of 10, he's going to try to pull it away. I'm just going to hunt that leg and or switch to the secondary leg when necessary. So do it a few times. Another very common thing I see is that when I do get to the position of removing the wrist and gripping the elbow, passing on by, sometimes I see guys close to my opposing shoulder. This is no problem. I like to address this immediately. I pop it off. I start circling and attacking the opposing leg. So again, this just throws in another aspect. You don't have to be 100% committed to that shot, but off-balancing our opponent is always a good idea. So whenever I get into the position of opponents grabbing wrists and I'm doing a good job of winning this angle, and I see that he's posting his hand on my shoulder for every common reaction, I look to start bumping the shoulder off immediately and stepping towards the secondary leg. Even if it's far away, that's no problem. I just have the goal of winning the hand fight. So causing a bunch of reactions early on in the match will make, when you start fully attacking later, much easier and much more effective. So typically when we're hand fighting, the objective remains the same. I'm A, trying to force heavy forward pressure, or B, trying to create the correct angle when I'm hand fighting. A lot of times when my opponent grabs the wrist, I understand that I can A, begin to remove the wrist from my wrist and reattack, or I can allow him to grab the wrist and understand that there are many attacks I can do when my opponent's controlling my wrist. They can actually, when he's attached to me, can actually help aid and guide me closer towards his legs. Again, I'm in here, I have the angle, creating angle, getting pressure forward so you put on his toes, and I'm understanding that I want to get to the legs, get behind them, and get to a dominant position. When the opponent starts grabbing the wrist, a lot of times you'll see me just kind of remove the wrist and I can go back to facing him very subtly. From here, I want to use him controlling my wrist to get closer to my opponent. When I'm in a stance and I'm controlling the wrist, sometimes I'll grab an inside grip on the elbow. I go thumb up, pinky around the joint of the elbow, and I pull it in and step across. Because I'm in this position to where I'm pulling the elbow in and I'm stepping my left leg outward, you can see it's kind of hard for him to hold on towards my wrist. Because I'm stepping towards the open part of his grip, it's very difficult for my opponent to kind of track me down and stay attached to me. Once he grabs wrist, I begin grabbing the grip on the elbow and shooting my left hand downward. As I shoot this down and grab the elbow, I'm stepping towards the outside of my opponent's lead leg. So we're in a stance right here. I want to start stepping and dragging. Simultaneously, as I step towards the lead foot, I step not on, but right outside of it. I take my secondary hand to the tip of my opponent's elbow. I start pushing my left elbow forward, and as you can see, I'm creating a bend in my opponent's arm, and that starts turning into a lever to help guide me closer towards my opponent. So opponent's going to look to grab a wrist. I'm going to look to start stepping and pulling as I get closer to my opponent. You want to be aware that we don't want to bring our wrist across and have to pull out here. It becomes kind of difficult. If he has the wrist control across and I'm in front of him, it's kind of difficult for me to just yank it out. So I like to step towards the lead leg, towards the outside. As I step towards the foot, I grab a grip on the elbow and start stepping towards my opponent's legs and the waist. So this is a very effective and efficient way of creating dominant angles when we're hand fighting. Opponent grabs the wrist. I had the idea of removing the wrist all the while attacking. We use these two movements simultaneously. I step towards the lead leg and grab a grip on the wrist as I rotate my forearm in. So I have this motion to where I'm not just yanking and stepping, I'm rotating, I'm pulling with my right arm, I'm pulling the elbow as I step towards the lead leg. And I'm rotating my left arm outward so it's harder for him to hold on to. If I just here and I'm trying to yank it downward and get it off, it's easy for him to hold on to and control. I start rotating so my hand is pulling towards the opening of my opponent's grip. I never want to pull into the grip or downward. I want to pull to where he's weakest. I want to pull in the direction of my opponent's grip. So he grabs the grip on the wrist. I start stepping towards the lead leg and rotating this arm outward. When I come here, I look to start locking hands around the waist, dropping my level to attack double, single, or just look to get behind him. Again, many ways we can kind of fully attack here, but the objective remains the same. Win the hand fight so we can create angles to attack our opponent properly. So opponent looks to grab the wrist. I look to rotate and step towards that lead leg. As I rotate and step, I begin pulling and stepping across towards my opponent, grabbing grip around the waist or dropping low for single legs. As he grabs wrist, I can step, I can change level, we get attacking a little bit lower. Also, you'll have situations where we go to attack, he goes to face us, but we can start snapping and circling and attacking the opposing side. So in both case scenarios, the objective remains the same. Create angles so it's easier for us to attack our opponent. Opponent looks to grab wrist. I look to grab grip on the elbow. As I eliminate that wrist, I come right back in for attacking the waist, the legs, upper body, etc. Another really common thing I like to do is implement arm drags in this situation. Previously, I was gripping at the elbow and kind of pulling that elbow across in order to create the same motion. Remember how I was saying earlier, whenever we can get the forearm across the center or the arm across the center line, it's much easier for us to attack. If his arm across the center line, have this whole side open for reattacks. So I'm using this motion of when opponent grabs wrist, instead of grabbing the elbow, I'm going to grab a grip on the armpit. And I have the same motion of rotating, creating this angle where I'm gripping armpit and rotating arm downward in order to gain positive control. Opponent grabs wrist. As I step towards the foot, I begin grabbing a grip around the armpit. Notice how I'm lacing my fingers inward towards the tricep, nice and deep. I don't want to be shallow here, that way I can slip. I want to be very almost wrist deep around here. So where if he pulls his arm in, he's kind of trapping my hands inside his armpit, and it's harder and more difficult for my opponent to control. So he grabs a grip on the wrist. I soon after step towards the lead leg, and I grab a grip on the armpit. As I step towards the armpit, I start shooting my left arm towards his far hip. Note that in the previous move, when he grabs my wrist, I was grabbing the elbow and trying to pull my arm outward in order to gain dominant position. From here, I'm looking to rotate my hand inward towards his far hip. Looking to rotate my hand inward towards the far hip and then retract as I gain shoulder-to-shoulder connection. So in this instance, because I have a control of the armpit, it's easy for me to go thumb down and eliminate this wrist. This is easier for me. When I was at the elbow, it's much more difficult. I don't have the same leverage. So when an opponent grabs wrist and I'm thinking arm drag, I want to reattack and get some points. I start stepping towards the lead leg, grab a grip on the armpit. I like to go wrist deep around the armpit, and I'm shooting my left hand towards the far hip. Once I'm here, I look to gain shoulder-to-shoulder connection. So I go from being a kind of staggered stance to being more square and attaching my shoulder to his. Where previously I was dragging and circling, here, as I get to this position, I like to drag and gain shoulder-to-shoulder connection. Once I'm here, I'm going to allow him reaction time to circle and try to face me. And then I'm going to complete the arm drag by circling behind, connecting my hands, and taking advantage of this position. Understanding the value of shoulders to shoulder connection when we're arm drag is very important. If he grabs wrist, and I just go here and pull behind, that works pretty high percentage. What works even more frequently is when I'm rotating wrist in towards the far hip, I'm stepping, gripping the armpit, and I have the intention of connecting our shoulders. If I just go here and I stay sideways, it's not as effective as me connecting our shoulders for a second or two. I connect shoulders with intention of giving him time to react. Maybe he tries to circle and face me. I allow reaction time, and then once I'm ready, I place my feet and I can start completely dragging and circling behind my opponent. So very important to understand, yes, it's good to arm drag from the armpit, but also as you're arm dragging from the armpit, understand that shoulder to shoulder connection is very beneficial and highly effective when we're arm dragging. So once again, opponent grabs the wrist. I step towards the lead leg. I grab the grip on the armpit. As my left hand goes towards the far hip, I start to connect shoulder to shoulder connection. Notice how his arm is bent and I'm creating a lever. I'm weighing myself on him while I get the shoulder to shoulder connection. He starts circling and trying to get my back. Because he's circling and I have the dominant hand fighting position, I'm able to win this circling battle. If we're here, this is 50-50. The second I get his arm across, more so 80-20. Once I get arm across an armpit, the game's over. I've got the back connection. So understanding when we're in a defensive position, as in we're hand fighting, our opponent grabs the wrist, there's many different reattacks and ways we can treat this. One of the most effective and efficient ways is grabbing a grip on the armpit and trying to arm drag. But very important when we're arm dragging, make sure we're creating a lever out of his arm by bending it and turning putting our wrist towards the far hip. I put our wrist towards the far hip and I gain shoulder to shoulder connection and I allow reaction time. Very important to allow reaction time in order to set up this proper back take. In addition to this, my opponent grabs a grip on the wrist. I also have a simple kind of variation of a super duck, to where super ducks generally you come towards the knee and up and back attacking. In this scenario, I'm just going to level change, not fully go towards the knee. The reason I'm not dropping down towards the knee is because my opponent in jiu-jitsu is a little bit more upright. If he was in a lower stance, I would need to get lower than him. So it's very understandable to drop a knee down towards the ground. Because it's a little bit more upright, I can look to start ducking with just a level change and not fully dropping the knees towards the mat. So when an opponent grabs wrist, I have the motion of opening up his wrist while he's attached to me. What you'll see a lot is when an opponent grabs my wrist, I give a little pull to see if he's tight. If I just pull and he slips off, I'm like, all right. And when I go duck, he's just going to let go of my wrist, and he's not going to be fully attached. So opponent grabs wrist, I give a little pull to make sure he's tight on there. As I give a pull, I start opening my wrist upward and start using a thing like a high C, switching off to the double, or I can opt to stay on the single and start rising, chasing the back. Why this works so well is due to a few factors. When I'm stepping inward and opening this up, you might think to yourself, why can't he just hold on to your wrist? Well, if he was in this position, it wouldn't be smart for me to start doing it because I'm going against his grip. Because my opponent is gripping me thumb down, I understand that the opening of his grip is in this direction. So whenever I pull, I have to pull my wrist away towards the opening of the grip. As he controls the wrist, I like to start stepping towards the lead leg, opening up my shoulder, swimming motion in order to create the correct reaction, open him up, get towards the hip, get towards the legs, and begin attacking. So understanding that he can't hold on to our wrist if we're pulling towards the opening of his connection. Again, when we're going here, we're opening and we're pulling away, so it's hard for him to control the wrist. So opponent controls my wrist. I'm looking to start re-attacking. I step towards the leg. I start opening, swimming, and redirecting my weight. If we're going to the knee, generally it's because the guy's in a bit of a lower stance, where I'm coming here. As I penetrate through, I have to drop to a knee in order to get low enough for this proper attack. But because my opponent's in front of me and he's kind of standing upright, I can pull away a little bit. He's tight on the wrist. And I can start swimming this up and attacking. What you'll see if this fails is you'll just end up on the outside to where you're pulling the wrist, you're attacking, and he just circles away and he faces you. So this is a movement that's kind of a high reward and little risk. I do it often to implement fakes and get my opponent moving and reacting just that much more. So just to reiterate, opponent grabs wrist. Sometimes it's a good idea to start just swimming on by really effortlessly. Things I'm looking out for is when I'm stepping through, I'm not looking to step through and have a bend at the hips to where he can start controlling the head, the neck. We all know what could happen there. When I'm stepping through my opponent, I avoid bending at hips, and I'm more focused on putting my head up through the hole I'm creating. So he's controlling my wrist, and I'm opening this window, and I'm doing a good job of stepping my head directly into that pocket, so it's hard for him to choke me. If I'm here, it's going to be hard for him to hop on me and start choking me. If I'm bent here, it's much easier for him to start connecting his hands around my neck and making it a hard time for me. So very important, when I'm looking to use this kind of technique, I'm ducking on the arm. Sometimes I'm pulling the wrist, and I start opening and attacking nice and high. If I start bending at the waist, it's going to be a bad day for me. He's going to start connecting his hands, acquiring chokes, and a lot of bad stuff. So again, opponent grabs wrist. I have the option of gripping the elbow, pulling, and creating dominant angles. I have the option of rotating this inward, getting my arm drag, shoulder to shoulder connection. He's going to circle, try to face me, and I'm going to try to attack from here. I also have other options where I can pull the wrist, I can start opening, attacking. Again, all with the intention of creating various angles to benefit our hand fighting. So understand that all these movements coincide and work together. A lot of times throughout these same movements, I like to implement things like snaps and hand fights. Sometimes he'll go from controlling wrists, I'll pound the head to distract him, and then I'll go right to peeling this off. So making all this stuff kind of work together is what really is going to win you a hand fight. Don't be afraid to, when he's grabbing the wrist, understand that, okay, I'm either going to take it off or use it to re-attack. But if you're having trouble, distract him a bit. Maybe we fake, and then we start re-attacking. Maybe I'll touch the head, push the shoulder, and then I'll start re-attacking in those fashions. So understanding that all these movements work together, and they're supposed to help you kind of flow more fluidly through this hand fighting is very important. Understand that whenever your opponent controls the wrist, we can use it to either remove the grip or begin re-attacking. Understand that whenever our opponent gets a collar tie, we can have the decision we have to make of either remove the collar tie immediately or use it to work with us. There's various things we can do, such as elbow passes, off bounces, and all the while we kind of have the goal of pushing our opponent's hand across the center line in order to create this outside angle so I can get closer to his legs, closer to attacking my opponent. When an opponent's in front of me, he grips a collar tie. A lot of times I have the idea of making him pressuring towards me. Now, exactly how I do that is by giving him forward pressure. I push him backwards. In turn, he wants to push on in towards me. As he pushes in towards me, I begin passing this elbow off. I touch my chin to the chest, and I allow him to carry his weight on through by me. So opponent grabs collar tie, I'm touching chin to chest, and allowing him to push his weight on through past me. If opponent gets collar tie and he's not pushing into me, it's going to be kind of difficult to use this elbow pass effectively. So I understand when he gets a collar tie, I want to be pressuring him towards him so he pressures back in towards me. And as he starts pressuring towards me, I begin changing angle and using this collar tie method. More specifically, when I'm elbow passing, I like to grab a thumb up grip on my opponent's elbow. Sometimes you see people thumb inside, thumb up. I like to go thumb outside, thumb up. I take my two middle fingers, place them on the joint of the elbow for a grip. As he's pressuring on in towards me, I begin changing the angle of my shoulders, all the while touching chin to chest. So I touch chin to chest, I change the angle of the shoulders in order to pass this elbow by. The idea is, if I just stand up here, try to turn and pass his elbow, I'm kind of creating a wedge in here, so it's hard for me to release this hand. When I touch chin to chest and turn shoulders, it's much harder for him to hold on to my neck and collar, thus making this elbow pass more fluid and easier to attack. So opponent gets collar tie, I have heavy forward pressure. He comes in towards me, I change shoulders, I touch chin to chest, and ultimately I eliminate his collar tie. Sometimes when a guy's kind of glued on us, I might have to, in addition to touching chin and changing angle, just drop my weight, my hips, about an inch or so. Sometimes a level change is all we need to complete this proper technique. So it's a good idea, whenever our opponent gets a collar tie, start implementing things like controlling the shoulder, to where if he opens, he pushes me away, he has a straight arm, I'm going to use different style of attacking. When he bends the arm, I'm using this elbow grip to kind of keep this arm bent at a 90-degree angle. When he pressures on in towards me, I touch chin to chest, I change the angle of the shoulders, and as you can see, his hand slides off of me pretty effortlessly. So again, opponent gets collar tie. It's very important to understand that I'm controlling the angle of the elbow with this elbow control. I'm stepping in, I'm keeping it bent. As I pressure him backwards, he pressures on and towards me. I step back to create a proper angle. As I touch chin and chest, I change the angle of my shoulders, and I pass him on by. So I have heavy forward pressure with his collar tie. I keep the elbow bent with my thumb outside grip. As he comes in towards me, I change the angle of my shoulders as I backstep and touch chin to chest. I'm able to slide this elbow directly off. I'm becoming a much smaller target, as before I was pressuring directly towards him. Now he comes towards me, and almost like a matador, I elbow pass him right on by. So opponent gets collar tie. I have heavy pressure forward. He pressures towards me. I touch chin to chest, change the angle of my hips and feet, and slide that right on by. Again, heavy pressure, heavy pressure. Comes in towards me, I backstep, and I slide that on by pretty easily. Collar tie, heavy pressure, comes in towards me, boom, I slide it on by. Soon after, opponent grabs collar tie. I like to start eliminating this collar tie. Again, we have the elbow pass, boom, pretty effortless. So opponent gets collar tie on me. Another nice variation I like to use is grabbing an over tie on my opponent. So as opposed to going inside and getting inside position, I take the outside route and I grab a collar tie over his collar tie. Again, opponent grabs collar tie, take my outside hand to his head, and I like to pull his head on in towards his bicep. He doesn't always allow me to do this, but whenever I feel a weak neck, I like to connect his ear to his bicep if possible. Now, same concept of having forward pressure. As he pressures on in towards me, I can start changing the angle of my shoulders and hips. From here, I grab a grip, an over grip over the bicep, and I begin dragging him on by. If you do it properly, his hand will hit towards the mat, but against a really good guy, more than likely you just pass him by and force him to reface you. Again, we're always implementing different techniques and different dimensions to this hand fighting to exhaust our opponent and make our attacking much easier. So opponent grabs collar tie, I meet him with the over tie. I pressure him backwards. He pressures in towards me, I change the angles, and I use the over tie in conjunction with the tie on the bicep to eliminate this collar tie and make him face me. I'm pushing him backwards. As he comes in towards me, I grab a grip on an over tie. I grab a grip on the bicep as I adjust my feet. I change the angles, and I toss him on down towards the mat. Less of tossing him by, more of a swooping motion down on towards the mat. I will always have the idea of bringing his hands closer towards the mat to make my job much easier. So opponent grabs collar tie, I pressure him backwards. As he comes in towards me, I grab over tie, I adjust my feet, I grab a grip on the bicep, again inside hook grip on the bicep. As I change the angle of my shoulders, I toss him on by. Very important we control that overhook, we control the bicep by pulling him down. As he comes in towards us, take a nice back step, and I swoop him on by, passing that collar tie off of me fairly easily. Pressure him backwards, he comes in towards me, I swoop him on by, toss him by, he's forced to run away, face me, and readjust. Another really effective move I like to do is when I put in his collar tie, I meet him with head-to-head position. From here, I like to grab a grip on the elbow, thumb outside. I'll touch my chin to my chest and roll, I'll neck roll to the outside. Whenever I can get a forearm across my chest, I know that I'm in good position to start reattacking. A lot of times I pressure him backwards, he pressures on towards me. I can pass that elbow off in order to create positive angles so I can reattack. Again, we all have the objective of creating this angle so I have easier access to my opponent's legs. I learned this specific type of neck rolling from a few of the Penn State guys. And whenever they're attaching themselves to my neck, grab a collar tie, I'm almost always pulling on the neck and they're pushing on the shoulder. From here, I grab a grip on the elbow in order to stop them from extending this arm. If they're extending, I'm going to have to pop up, shove down, use different techniques. But for here, because I'm leaning forward, I'm using my body weight to keep this elbow bent. I touch chin to chest. I roll my neck to the outside without level changing. Notice how I'm not coming down here. My level staying the same in my stance. I touch chin to chest. I roll my neck to the outside. I pressure in towards him. As he pressures back, I push that elbow on by. I start attacking the hips, the legs, the back, etc. All the while I'm hand fighting, I have the idea of not circling, but stepping towards the lead legs, stepping towards my opponent in an aggressive fashion. So whenever we're here, we're not just here circling. I'm circling in, stepping towards him. I keep this arm bent as I step towards him. I neck roll to the outside. He pressures towards me. I pass him by. Notice how I'm stepping in, through, and around my opponent the entire time. Constant pressure makes it harder for me to hand fight on the back of his heels, and makes it easier for me to start attacking. I know that if he's coming backwards, eventually he's going to try to shove his way forward, and then that's when I start really attacking. So opponent gets collar tie. I start having heavy backwards pressure. I'm pushing him, stepping towards that leg. I neck roll to the outside. He pressures towards me. I pass it on by and start attacking. So understanding whenever we can get a forearm across, I can get pressure in towards me. It's a good idea to start pushing this elbow by, and boom, I'm very close to attacking my opponent in a dominant fashion. So just to reiterate, opponent grabs collar tie. I can use things like, as he pushes towards me, eliminating that collar tie, re-attacking. I can use things like over ties in order to bring his hands on down towards the mat for attacking and creating angles. And I can use things like neck rolls to where I neck roll towards the outside, he pressures in towards me, I can start pushing this by. One more time to the side. I can start pushing this by in order to start attacking my opponent properly. All of this is depending on pressure and timing. I'm pressuring very heavily into my opponent to force him to come towards me. As he pressures back, I can start implementing these techniques. So attacking when an opponent is touching shoulders. Previously, I showed you guys the concept of touch and go, to where I touch him. As he goes to touch me, before he makes connection, I start attacking. For this specific movement, I allow my opponent to touch his shoulders for a second or so. I give him pressure forward. As he pressure back on in towards me, I start chopping, changing my level. I have the option of chopping, changing the level a little bit in order to reach the hips while standing. I also have the option of posting the hands and changing my level a lot in order to reach the legs. Both of these concepts work together pretty effortlessly, but understanding which one to do in the moment is very important. If an opponent is pushing on shoulder, he has heavy pressure towards me, I can chop and go low. In addition, if he's posting on shoulder, doing heavy pressure towards me, I can chop and change level just a little bit. Personally, I feel like if an opponent is giving a little bit of pressure, it's a good idea just to go towards the hips. If he's applying a lot of pressure, it's a good idea to go down towards the knee and collect the legs in a double. I feel like it's like if he's coming in towards me really heavily, because he has so much pressure forward, I bump, I can clear, I can get really deep on through my opponent's hips. A lot of times, if he's my size or smaller, I look to attack with the head right in the middle. If he's big, I like to attack head inside, very deep. A lot of times I'm protecting my neck with my shoulder as I'm attacking. Opponent pushing on shoulders, he's pressuring heavy towards me. I clear, I bring head, neck, and shoulder connection to the hips. I can start attacking. So understand that when an opponent's pressuring towards us heavily, when an opponent's touching our shoulders, if he's just touching us, that's one thing, but I need heavy pressure. So I push him backwards. As he pressures towards me, I can start clearing the shoulders, ducking on through, getting to the legs and to the hips. So when he's on the shoulders, I like to use V grips, either bump at the elbow or closer towards the wrist. When I'm bumping, I do it together. I bump both of them up, get level, drop below. Same concept when he goes one arm. If he gives me one arm, he gives me heavy pressure, I bump, I can start attacking a single. So again, simple concept. When he touches shoulders, allow him to touch you for a second or so. Give him pressure forward so he pressures back in towards you. And then we can start bumping and attacking. So oftentimes when we're hand fighting, an opponent's going to try to gauge distance, post on our head. Whenever they post on my head, I like to get it off immediately. I don't like him to push me away or control the distance between us. So opponent posts on my head, I grab with the wrist and I peel it off. Soon after, he grabs my wrist with the intention of removing his hand. From here, I'll grab his elbow with my secondary hand and I'll push it on through towards the center line. Again, we have the same principle of pushing the arm across the center line in order to access the legs. So opponent pulls from my head, I remove the head of the post on the head. He grabs the wrist, I grip elbow, I take a step towards outside and start pushing it on by. From here, I can start accessing and attacking my opponent's legs and hips. So again, opponent pulls from the head, I remove this head post. He grabs a grip on my wrist, I grab his elbow, step to the outside, push on by. From here, I'll transfer directly to the legs and start running him on down towards the mat. So again, opponent post on the head, I start removing the post on the head. He grabs my wrist for defense, I grab his elbow. I step towards the leg while pushing his elbow on by. I let go of the elbow, transfer directly to the legs, and able to start attacking. I can start swinging to singles. I can connect hands around the double or around the waist and chase it back. Many different options, all essentially driven by the ability of pushing his elbow across his center line. So opponent post on my head, I remove the post. He grips wrist, I grip elbow. I step towards the leg that I want while pushing his elbow across. As I release, I transfer down towards the feet and start connecting my hands around the legs. Whenever our opponent starts posting our head, it's a good idea to start removing that post. If he goes to re-grip the wrist, we can use that elbow pass to create angles so we can access the legs. So whenever opponent's in front of me and they're looking to control my wrist, I have to make the decision of either get it off immediately and or use it to score. When he's controlling the wrist, I understand that I can start implementing fakes to cause reactions towards the legs. In this case, I start faking towards the rear leg. He starts to step it back. As he steps it back, I go to arm drag in order to bring that leg closer so I can start attacking the legs. This is a scenario where we use a few different types of hand fighting in order to get closer to attacking my opponent's lower body. So opponent controls wrist, I start faking lower body, he pulls it back as a reaction. Soon after, I decide to grab either elbow or armpit in order to drag and step my body closer to my opponent's legs. I can start attacking singles, doubles, and various lower body attacks, all with the same concept of re-dragging. So opponent controls wrist, I fake to the lower body, he steps back. I decide either to control elbow or to pull that armpit. Nevertheless, it's the same concept of dragging, stepping, and lowering my level in order to access the legs. I have the availability to stay upright, keeping my knees off the mat and attacking the waist, or I can lower my level completely and start attacking the legs. Opponent grabs a grip on the wrist, I fake towards the lead leg. As he steps back, I begin re-dragging and re-attacking my opponent's lower body. So again, use this concept whenever the opponent is controlling the wrist. Make the decision to start using fakes and re-attacks to implement this drag properly. So once again, opponent grabs wrist, I fake towards the lead leg, he pulls it back. I grip the elbow in order to drag it on by and bring those legs closer towards me so it's easier for me to attack. My match against Muhammad Ali, even though he was bigger, stronger, I was able to work around his hand fighting in order to get his hands towards the mat. A lot of this hand fight, the basis of my hand fighting involves heavy forward pressure in order to get heavy forward pressure in return. When my partner ties up with me, he gets inside position first, taking collar tie and inside shoulder post. Because he's pressuring forward on me, I understand that it's a good idea to allow him to pressure forward in order to get his hands towards the mat. When I'm looking to impose an effective snap, when our partner has inside position, as he has collar tie and shoulder post, I'm looking to chop at the forearms, at the meat of the forearms. I don't want to go too high, nor do I want to go too low. So I give him forward pressure. Usually I'll be posting. Usually I'm going thumb down, post in the shoulder to just kind of change the angle in which he's applying his pressure. As he comes forward towards me, I take a nice step back. And as I step back, I start lowering the level of my upper body. So he's coming towards me, and I'm stepping back. And then all in one motion, I'm snapping the hands. And it's not a snap where I'm just using my hands to chop. I'm using outside my palms, and my whole upper body is going down. I'm using my torso, my back, and everything to chop and weigh his hands towards the ground. So what I'm trying to avoid is chopping like this. When he pressures in, I'm looking to let my body drag and pull him on down towards the mat. So again, we don't want just our arms chopping at the forearm. We want our back, our torso, our core to be chopping and pulling along with our arms. So partner is tied up with me. I use a post in the shoulder to kind of create separation of our heads. As he applies heavy forward pressure, I take a back step, and as I'm stepping back, I'm looking to aim towards the crook of the elbow in the beginning of the forearm. As I chop, my whole body, upper body, comes down, and I'm ready for reattacks. What you'll see sometimes is you'll chop. As his hands hit the mat, he'll take a shot and start attacking. We avoid this by following his head height. As he's pressuring forward, I step back, I chop, and I'm here. I'm ready for reattacking, taking front heads, going over the top, etc. So make sure when you're chopping, you chop in a good resting stance. So once again, understanding that it's very important not to just chop with your hands, but chop with your body. Let your body drag him on down. It becomes very overbearing on an opponent when you're able to put your whole body behind movements. So opponent's hand fighting, he gets the inside collar tie and a shoulder post. From here, you see I have outside positions. As he has heavy forward pressure, I take a back step. I begin chopping at the forearms, clearing the hands towards the mat, and I can get immediately reattacking. Again, this is very important hand fighting to understand. When guys are applying heavy forward pressure and he wins the inside position, your opponent's offensive, he gets inside collar tie and posting on you, he's coming at you. We take a step back, make him feel like he's winning, and we put our body behind chopping the forearms down towards the mat. Whenever we get the hands towards the mat, we know we're doing a good job winning the hand fight. Very good. So realize that whenever I'm chopping, taking a back step, I'm using that back step to help put weight behind these chops. Chopping at the forearms, right here, not just using my hands, but as I back step, boom, I'm putting my body behind chopping and snapping the hands off and towards the mat. So the double pull method, a lot of times it just looks like you have two hands on the head and you try to throw one by. But it's a really effective way and efficient way to wear your opponent out. Oftentimes you see guys pumping and pulling around with one collar tie. In this instance, I'm using two hands to wear on my opponent's head and collar. As the opponent grabs and initiates a hand fight, he grabs the collar tie first. I meet him with my own collar tie. Make sure not to swing around outside, but to shoot my own from the hip to the collar inside. Soon after, I'll go right to the collar, or I'll go touch the shoulder and then to the collar. The reason I don't always go right to the collar is because as I'm reaching for this, he can be bumping up, changing levels, and attaching. If he gets a collar tie on me, I get a collar tie on him towards the inside, and I touch the shoulder first. It just kind of lets me feel where he's at and if he's trying to attack or not. From here, I'll just touch, and I'll meet my secondary hand on the collar. From here, it's typically a pulling backwards method where I'm using my body weight to pull and weigh on my opponent's head. Inside of this, we have times where we yank them on down towards the mat, and we also have times where we just continuously pull on the head, where I take it back a step backwards and I pull. I take a step backwards and I pull, all with the intention of wearing my opponent out and getting his hands towards the mat. So we have two different variations of pulling where he gets a collar tie, I meet him with my own collar tie, post and double collar pull. From here, I'm backstepping, I'm pulling. I'm backstepping, I'm pulling, and I have scenarios where I'm yanking his hands on down towards the mat, all produced by the backstep. I like to make sure that I'm not just staying stagnant and snapping him on down. I get much more pull and drive when I take a step backwards and I allow the momentum that transfers from my feet to hips to upper body to pull him on down. So as you can see me while I'm solo, I backstep and I pull. I backstep and I pull. I backstep and I pull my opponent down. You don't just want your hands doing the work. You want your back, your body, your lats all pulling on your opponent's head. So opponent grabs collar tie, I grab my own collar tie. Inside post on the shoulder, right to the double collar pull. Every time I step back, I pull. Every time I step back, I pull. Now we have times where you're pulling maybe 30 to 50% of effort. And then we have also times where we're trying to get the hands to the mat, where it's more, less of a slower pull and more of a yank right down to the mat. Using these both in combination will make it easier to win the hand fight, especially when you have the goal of getting your partner's hands on the mat. So we have the first method where I have inside double collar tie, and I'm pulling, I step back. I pull, I step back. And we have the second method where I'm trying to get his hands towards the mat. I get inside position, post on the shoulder, double collar tie. I step back and I'm yanking. He's again, I step back and I'm yanking. So, the only real difference is your intention behind this. We're still backstepping and pulling. We're just either backstepping, pulling to get him tired, or we're pulling to make him touch the mat. Make your decision while you're hand fighting, and then understand that if you can get his hands to the mat, you can win the hand fight. So we have an elbow pass, a snap, and a step, all kind of working simultaneously together. In this sequence, opponent's grabbing a collar tie, and I recognize I want to get this off very soon. I grab a grip towards the elbow and or towards the armpit. As I take a step in the right direction, towards the right, I touch my chin to my chest, and I drag this one off. As I have the motion of my opponent's arm going across the center line, my opponent always has the reaction of trying to face me. Because I understand this, I use this to my advantage. As he grabs collar tie, I grip elbow or armpit. For me, I think armpit's a bit more secure. As I step towards the right, I touch chin to chest, pass this elbow on off. As he tries to face me, I grab a grip on the collar tie while keeping my hand around the armpit. I step towards the side that I want as I simultaneously pull his hands towards the mat. So I have the motion where I elbow pass, he faces me, I transfer to the collar, snap and pull. Understand that when I'm snapping, I'm always snapping and clearing my feet. Never want to snap my opponent so where he's able to attack my feet. I always have a conscious thought that when I'm snapping, get my feet out the way. Opponent grabs collar tie. I pressure forward. Now I grab grip on the armpit. I take a step towards my right as I touch chin to chest to clear the elbow. As my opponent tries to face me, I have a bit of a relief in the elbow. Initially, to clear it off, I was pretty strong here clearing it off, but now when it relaxes, I want to give him a sense of comfort when he's facing me. If I'm tense all the way through, he's going to look to face me, or look to, when he does face me, he's going to be expecting an attack. So once I elbow pass, I release some of pressure so he's able to face me. That way I can use that elbow pass later on in the sequence. Opponent grabs collar tie. I grab a grip on the elbow. As I step towards the right, I touch chin to chest and clear this elbow on off. As I release some pressure on the elbow, he begins to face me. While he faces me, I start transferring hand to the collar tie. I start using the armpit grip and the collar grip to snap towards the mat while I step towards the side that I want. Understand that my goal here is to put my opponent's hands on the mat and get closer to attacking the legs and or the hips. So opponent has collar tie. I grab grip on the armpit. I start stepping towards the right, touching chin to chest. As I push this elbow on off, he begins facing me, and I begin transferring head to collar tie. I set my feet up so it's easy for me to explode towards the left once I pull on down towards the right. So again, we have the motion of clearing the elbow off, step towards the right, chin to chest, clear this off. As he faces me, I grab collar tie along with elbow grip. I snap towards my feet as I step towards the left and set up this hand fight sequence properly. So once again, opponent grabs collar. I grab a grip on the armpit. I step towards the right, chin to chest, slide this elbow on off of me. As opponent faces me, I transfer rear hand to the collar tie. I begin snapping and stepping towards the outside. Once again, opponent grabs collar tie. I clear it off. He faces me. I snap and I step towards the outside, chasing the angles that I want. Again, our goal here is to clear the collar tie off of our collar, get our opponent's hand towards the mat, and get closer to attacking the hips. So drilling the hand fight. It's important to understand that there's many different variations of hand fighting, and controlling inside position is one of the most important ones. In this hand fighting drill, we have the goal of staying on our opponent's collar as long as possible. We're both starting in a neutral position, and we're staying in the fire. We're staying in the midst of the hand fight. We're not collar tying and then backing away, and then collar tying again and then creating distance. We're staying up close and personal, and we're trying to incorporate all the things that we know. The more that you learn from this, the more you can implement in this type of drill. Essentially, the basis of the drill is opponent gets a collar tie on me. Now it's time to drill. As soon as he acquires a collar tie, I understand that I want to get it off immediately and acquire my own collar tie. He's going to do the same thing. The second I touch him, he's going to get it off, get his own, and now we got back and forth battle where we're both trying to get and acquire our own collar tie. How to win the drill? It's a good idea to make this a game. Games are meant to be won and dominated. When I'm drilling this, I have the concept of hanging on my opponent's collar as long as possible. The more time I can keep inside position and control my hand on the collar, the more exhausted my opponent's going to get. It's a game. It's a balancing game of tiring your opponent out and knowing when to fully attack these hand fighting sequences. So understanding that as soon as the drill starts, the goal is to hang on your opponent's collar tie as long as possible and to get him off of yours as soon as possible. We don't want a few seconds to come by to where He gets a collar tie, and I'm like, all right, circling, figure out what to do, and then I rip it off. Just in there, he was pulling on my head 3, 4, 5 times. I'm getting more tired as time goes on. As soon as the opponent gets a collar tie, I recognize that. I peel it off. I get my own collar tie, start yanking it, he takes it off, and we're going to go back and forth to where I'm trying to stay on the head, and he's trying to stay on mine. Again, we have the concept of getting him off of my head as soon as possible and stay on my opponent's collar as long as possible. So in this hand fight, again, once you learn more and more, you can start working in things like fakes, underhooks, overhooks, as well as your inside ties, all with the intention of getting on your opponent's collar as long as possible and wearing them out every second that passes.